In this episode, you're going to meet Martin Leitner. He's a transpersonal psychologist trained in polyvagal and internal family systems. This is a longer episode than normal on this podcast, and that is because Martin and I wanted to take the time to really walk you through the process that you might come across in therapy of how it is that you uncover what your truth is and how you can express that in a really safe way that is going to move you through the healing journey. There is a little bit of swearing that we have in this episode, so please be mindful of those moments and have an enjoyable journey. Allow your heart to listen. Welcome to this interview with Martin Leitner, who is a transpersonal psychologist trained in polyvagal and internal family systems with an ongoing meditation practice for over 25 years. He was born in Austria, is based in Bali, and he and I met through Clarity Breathwork, which you will know I love, and anyone I ever meet through Clarity Breathwork is someone that we all will adore. And so we're very excited. And seeing as his internal family systems, all of my parts of myself, including the ones that aren't even human, are so excited about having Martin join us today for what is a pretty rich topic around speaking your truth. And I just wanted to start letting Martin be welcomed into this space with a little intro about himself, how he got into being a transpersonal psychologist and the type of work that he has found himself embodying, because we all know that we embody what we're also here to learn. So what is that, Martin, for you?
Thank you very much. I like to be adored. Adore me, people, please. Everyone. There's something in me that's just like very excited about that. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here and to play with you on this topic. My story, I give it to you in a nutshell. Let's see how that lands. I was born on a Wednesday afternoon in October. My parents died when I was young. My father when I was 9, my mom when I was 18. And that experience of grief with my dad and kind of grief and relief with my mom, because my mom was a rather intense, rich woman with a lot of multiplicity inside her. She was also very violent. And that shaped me. And the first direction I went was substances. Never felt really addicted to anything but partying, psychedelics, and exploring those realms and having those moments of like, oh wow, there's a whole other dimension to life. And then on an LSD trip, I actually had this insight where I noticed all the different voices in my head and there was so much going on. And then a voice said, "Oh my God!" And in German, and specifically in Austria, we say like when you're high or stoned or drunk, we literally use the word like, "Oh, I'm so shut down. I'm so closed." And that echoed through my mind like, "Ha ha ha! Wow, man, I'm so closed." And that closedness just opened my eyes and like, "Oh my God, I've been wanting to open up, and here I'm doing the exact opposite." So I quit drugs. I also accidentally became a vegetarian. Looked for meditation because I wanted to become enlightened, and I was very serious about that. Found a guru, joined what I now lovingly tongue-in-cheek call a cult light. Did my, I don't know how many thousands of hours of meditation. Graduated with a master's degree in spiritual bypassing and left after 11 years and moved to Bali and stumbled like through my partner at the time, stumbled into breathwork. Breathwork was what taught me how to feel. And coming from my spiritual monkhood, I was serious about that. I didn't drink or smoke. I didn't have sex for 8 years, like throughout my 20s. I was very committed. 9 years, I imagine, almost. Too long, way too long. And breathwork taught me or showed me how much I had been repressing, and that I've been using meditation as a kind of filter lens to meditate through all my unintegrated past, my trauma. And the path I was following was very traditional Eastern, hard up, transcend what you don't need, looking at certain low frequency negative feelings as impurities that you give to the guru or the higher consciousness to take care of it. And then breathwork showed me like how much I hadn't been feeling the grief after my mom's passing, the grief after my dad's passing, the so many things basically. Parallel to that, I was working as a business coach and business consultant. Started off with branding and realizing that people didn't know what they want often. They had ideas, but then the contradictions in them got into the way, so to speak. And I learned very quickly that it wasn't the lack of strategy that held them back, but often because we could find a three-tier pricing structure that would make sense for the business, but what got in the way was the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs of like, how dare I charge that much? Who am I of putting myself out there? And that got me into psychology. And because I was really interested in like, okay, that the strategy is not going to do anything if the person holds those beliefs. And then I followed the more traditional one that we're trying to get rid of those things that we don't like. The perfectionist is a blockage to my success. My inner critic is just my enemy that I need to fight, which didn't work for me. It felt like there's already tension inside me, and then I'm adding more tension to that tension. There's like a battlefield happening inside. And then I found internal family systems, and before that, I had spoken to my different parts. I'd written from a part's perspective one I would lovingly call Helmut, my Germanic part, who very much knows how things are done and what's right and what's good and what's quality and all those people who don't follow the rules. And then I have a whole lot of other ones. But IFS was the one that really showed me that I can integrate all of that, that everything is welcome. And that shifted things for me massively on a personal level and working with clients once I went through my training and everything. Life has been different ever since.
Oh, beautiful. What an immense journey, Martin. And thank you for sharing the experiences, especially the early years. I think knowing that we all can have a tendency to want to try and bypass, and the ways in which we bypass, not just with the substance approach, or for me it was overworking. So for me it was just hiding in work, which I think is a very socially acceptable one. It's when we can acknowledge what it is that we're doing, what our different strategies are, and also how we can move into something else like the spiritual bypassing, right? And how we can use something like meditation also to do the same thing. Like there's many ways. I just say it's from the light body training perspective that I have, I call it going mental. So it's just, whatever bypass, like whatever that emotional disassociation, whatever you want to call it, you're just going mental. It's all just up in here. People who just spend their whole time doing energy work, right? And they're just like in the energy. It's like, well, that's still up here. And it's not always coming back down and really acknowledging feeling, and just being a human feeling. And so I thank you for really sharing that part of your journey with us, because I also feel it's really relevant when we talk about speaking your truth, because I don't know about you, but my personal experience of speaking my truth was that I was always quite good at speaking my truth. I'm definitely someone who has no problem speaking up, being a loudmouth. And so I'm not a wallflower when it comes to saying what I want to say and what's on my mind. However, I couldn't say that I was always speaking my truth when I was in that going mental bypassing stage. And so I'd love to know for you, how do you tune into what is speaking your truth for yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, I resonate with the different ways of bypassing as well. I want to acknowledge that. Speaking my truth, I want to speak my truth right now for something inside me that rubs a little bit against the word truth, to be honest, because it has I like it to some degree and is a word that can be very much used as something fixed, permanent, always true. And I know the way that you refer to it is the truth changes. This is my truth in this moment. And to me, it's the authentic expression of what's real inside me, what's true in any given moment. And to be honest, I'm not very much someone who believes in the binaries of life, the good and bad, the right and wrong. I think life is much more nuanced and complex. But I believe in the binary of yes and no. And life at a very simple level is an ongoing chain of yeses and nos. And speaking my truth, living my truth means I say yes wholeheartedly, full embodied, fuck yes to the things that I want, and a wholehearted, embodied, unapologetic, hell no to the things that I do not want. And if I can do that without any echoes coming in of like, if I say yes to that, what will people think? If I say no to that, will they still like me? Will they leave me? Then there is a freedom there. If I can do it with just like, yes, I'm gonna do that. Yes, I like that. No, thank you.
I like that. I feel a sense of like all your parts are all in. It's like there's a team that's cohesive and they're all like, yep, we're all on board. We're going in this direction. It's like everyone on the boat is going to go in the same direction. No one's going to have a mutiny in your journey and in that process. So I really, really enjoy your definition of what that is for you. And yes, you touched on, for me, truth is fluid because I can only ever know what is true to the relative moment that I'm in with the relative awareness that I have. And so that's where I see truth sitting. And for me, it's actually one of my keys in the gene keys. So it brings in a lot of inquiry for me. Like that's where truth sits, is in a place of inquiring, of asking those questions and really sitting with, what does it feel like when I sit with, is that okay? Is that a yes? Is that a no? So with your yes and no, like there has to be a real inquiry, probably with the whole team for me.
Absolutely. Oh, for me as well. Like the way I'm making it sound, it is simple, I think, in principle, but there is a conversation first, listening to everybody's concerns, fears, excitements, and being with that through meditation or through journaling. And the bigger the decision, the longer it might take. But eventually I will land on that clarity and very clear yes or no. Small decisions, and I can feel them immediately in my body. If they're life-altering decisions, I'm gonna take my time with that.
And I think that's very sensible. The former lawyer in me says, well, you need to go and find out more information when there's big decisions, and even sometimes small, right? It's like, is there more information to be gathered in order to get the team on board to know that you've looked at all of the different angles in order to get that approval, right? So if we just even thought about it in the way business works, right? Everyone has to bring something to the board, and then the board sits and says, yep, okay, we're going in this direction. It's, what's the relevant information from all the departments that need to come through. So I really love that. And the other thing I just want to pick up on that you said that I also like really strongly resonated, as you were saying about your hell no's and your F yeses, it is the phrase of, I'm saying yes to loving myself more in those yeses, right? And no to things that are less love to myself. So always coming back to that, I guess, our Clarity Breathwork center of kind of what is helping me love me and life more, so that there's a greater fulfillment that comes through from our choices.
Yeah, I like the love. I like to see the love in both the yes and the no, actually. Like the often in society, and I think especially in the self-help and motivation and productivity and transcending sort of mindset, yes is often seen as positive and no is negative. And to me, it's very much, they're both equally important. And can we celebrate them both? And consent being often referred to in sexual contexts. And I like the idea, like the only appropriate answer or reply to a no is thank you. And could it be that in all contexts? Do you want that? Do you want to do that? Yes, thank you, let's do it. Do you want to do that? No, thank you. Moving on. And having that on the inside, that a no and a yes are an equal expression of love. Like,
Yes.
why are so many people afraid of saying no? And other people are afraid of saying yes. And I guess that's where we're going towards our topic as
Yes.
well. Like, what what influences that?
And hence why I wanted to bring up those nuances, because I feel like they're really important foundations in what is speaking your truth, and where we can get stuck in that yes or no, and what am I choosing a yes or a no for. So that comes to the question of, what do you think makes it so hard for people to speak their truth?
Oh God. Where to start? How much time do we have?
But let's go back to what we were just saying, because
The yes and the no's.
the yeses and the nos is a really great example of why is it so hard to say yes to something that's going to be, so wonderful, so exciting, and yet there's this part of me that's going, no, 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 I'm not ready, or no, I'm not sure about that. Like, what would that be at a very simple level if I was just for me and my decision? Let's take other people out of speaking my truth.
First step is noticing what happens, thinking about giving a no to something. And there's probably some excitement if I'm even leaning in that direction. And then there's the other echo coming in of like other parts, other voices that are saying, and when I say echo, I mean an echo from the past. There's something inside me, parts speaking up. So like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, are we deserving? Are people going to get mad at us, if we're making more money than them, if we're moving into a bigger house? What's behind that? And I can ask myself the question, I can ask that part the question, what are you afraid would happen if we moved into that house? Oh, people gonna judge us. Okay, what happens then? Like, they're not gonna like us anymore. Okay, what happens then? We're gonna be all alone. And usually three, four questions in, three, four layers down, it comes down to I'm not gonna be good enough, I'm gonna be left, I'm gonna be all alone. And the same thing with the no's. If I'm saying no to something, are they going to leave me? Are they going to abandon me? They're not going to like me. They're going to get mad at me. There's some kind of bracing happening for impact. And that is the echo from the past, which we often refer to like a trauma response. Noticing is the first step. And where does it come from? That's my working theory, is around we're being actually socialized into it. In developmental child development psychology, there is what's colloquially known as the terrible twos, which I find is a terrible expression for what's actually happening there. Because the little toddler at around 2 years old, what happens is basically until yesterday, the little sunshine followed their caregiver, their mommy, their daddy with a smile, and they're all happy. And the next day they wake up and mommy comes in or daddy comes in or caretaker comes in and says like, so shall we go to the park? And the little sunshine goes, no. And the caretaker's like, oh wow, there's a no that was for the last 2 years a yes. And the thing is that the little one, they don't have the cognitive ability to have spent the night reflecting deeply on that decision the next day. Do I want to go to the playground tomorrow? Do I want to go to the park? I'm not sure about this. No, it's instinctual. Just saying no, it's part of our individuation process, the process of becoming a person, a free and liberated person from any outside influence as well as inside influence. And depending how the parents react is going to condition us. Because if we learn that we're saying no and the parent goes like, okay, you don't want to go to the park? Cool. And then you ask 10 minutes later, how about going to the park now? Chances are the little one is going to say yes. That's an age where we want to give kids choices. Do you want to wear the red skirt or the blue shirt? And there is a little bit of choice there. They have autonomy. They step into their agency. And all it needs is the acknowledgement of that. It's not even saying yes to everything that the kids want or no to anything they don't. We can explain to them. So like, I know you don't want to go there. This is really important to me. I can't leave you alone by yourself because we need to go shopping. We don't have food. I'm here with you, and I know you don't want to do this. In that acknowledgement of the resistance, there's already so much love and integration happening rather than like, I don't care, you can stay alone at home. Like, I give you something to cry. That's the kind of stuff I heard. And the next thing is when, no, let's actually pause it here. Like we're gonna go to the next step. Like I'm gonna bring you to
Yeah.
the next step there. But yes, like it's a learned response of how do the people that are important to us react if we're saying yes or no. And if mommy is like, if I'm saying no and mommy gives me the face of that she's not happy, that's where our neuroception comes in, polyvagal theory, if we were reading people's eyes and their face constantly, and babies can already do that. They know that mommy has a response, and sooner or later they will associate mommy's response or daddy's response with them saying no to something that they were not happy with. And so we're being conditioned at a very young age, actually, that it might not be safe to say yes, or it might not be safe to say no.
Thank you. That's a beautiful explanation to start us off with, where some of those root concerns come with our yeses and our nos, and where we start to lay in the foundations of those beliefs that obviously recur and repeat often for most of us throughout our lives in other scenarios. And I'm sure that you see it. Sometimes you can resolve that and have quite a good way of masking that in certain areas of your life. So I don't know, maybe those no's, you manage it really well in romance, but actually when it comes to your job, you know, when someone says no to you at work, like that's where suddenly everything goes wrong. And so it doesn't have to manifest itself in a big trauma, because obviously you mentioned about trauma, and I just want to acknowledge, like, it doesn't necessarily come out in an obvious part of our lives. It can be very traumatic, and it depends on someone's childhood as to the kinds of experiences we have to live through in order for that lesson to be learned. But sometimes it's also just comes through those micro stresses, right, that build up. Like you said, seeing it in your business clients, right, and seeing where some of those yes and no's could have got really entangled for someone, just in, you know, they have a good, comfortable life, but they're expressing themselves through their business. So it comes through in many nuanced ways, is my feeling, just to highlight and stop and pause with just the ways in which we can not even be aware of how that's influencing our yeses and nos.
Absolutely. And I love that you're bringing that in, because I keep hearing that for people, like, trauma is always associated with the big things. You know, I had a car accident, I was raped, I was beaten throughout my childhood, you know, things like that, the big T traumas, which, yes, they can have a massive impact. But trauma is also the things that didn't happen. The not having felt seen, the not having felt acknowledged, the not having felt validating in my feelings. There was an absence of action on the side of our caregivers that can equally cause a wound. Trauma just means wound. And it's fascinating because we specifically refer to it as like a physical trauma or physiological trauma, and then psychological trauma. And the wound itself, I believe, is not the problem, because if I break my leg, you know, I get a cast and I walk around, you know, for a while, and I'm gonna adjust the way I walk because of that wound. But once the bone has grown back together, or once my cut has healed, I might have still a scar, but that wound has been integrated.
Mm.
And the same thing on a psychological level. The trauma is not the problem. The lack of integration, the unhealed wounds, the unintegrated traumas, those are the ones that can impact the way we perceive life, show up in life, or reality.
And the compensatory, it reminds me of when we talk about like a trauma, everyone knows that you break your leg, you have compensatory movement patterns, right? And then you have to rebalance the movement pattern in order to have full integration of your healing. So if we don't do that with our emotions, we create these emotional compensatory patterns, which may or may not be the bypassing that we mentioned earlier on, but it can also be other coping strategies that we use in relationships, in dynamics, which affects what I was saying earlier on around, I always felt like I was speaking my truth, but because I was emotionally bypassing myself, my truth didn't necessarily land particularly well, and would not always be received with much love. And I see this, and I do see it with clients as well, where they can't connect to what that true emotion is, that they feel there's a way that they need to express themselves, or I must go and express myself. And actually, that expression may not be relevant, because if they really get in touch with their feelings, that may be the speaking, as it were, all by itself. So I personally, I see this, and this is not from a trauma perspective, this is my little energy world, sees this interaction of our healing and how we make these compensatory patterns and how we integrate as so much of what we want to speak as our truth in that moment are the internal pieces that want to be heard within us. And if we give and tend to that, we see our triggers and our own internal dialogue properly and give it that full presence, especially if it can be loving presence or accepting presence at least, then those pieces are integrated, and there's so much less that we actually think we need to say to someone else. And so that's what I see as to how energetically it plays out. I would like us to just take a step before we jump into where that takes us, because I'm aware that takes us an extra step further, but I just want to give the listeners like an idea of also how this conversation's unfolding, because just so everyone knows, Martin and I have spent some time working through this conversation because we know it's a tricky conversation to have. I'd love you just to tend to how people could get self-awareness even of those compensatory patterns and fine-tuning into the real trigger that's underneath. Like, how can people start to build that relationship like you have with your parts? What are some ideas for people from your experience?
I love that you brought in the word relationship, because that is the key to being with my experience. If I get triggered, and Gabor Mate has this beautiful, simple analogy where it's like, if you look at a gun, the trigger is the smallest part. You touch that and the thing goes off. I am the gun. I am loaded. Somebody touches the trigger, and then people go like, "Why did you do that? You triggered me." It's like, so step one, taking responsibility for my response. There's something that's happening inside me right now. And in IFS, we speak about blending, which is a continuum of, if I'm unblended, then I can rest in my, what I call big Martin energy, or deep capacity, or the capital S self there. And from here, I'm noticing, oh, I'm getting triggered. That is a fairly unblended state, or like it's a continuum. So it's not like blended or unblended. It's like, parts can lean in, I can feel them. Or if the blend completed, then that part takes over. And then I'm becoming the anger, then I'm becoming the perfectionist, and I'm becoming the righteousness, or whatever is running in me, because I have very little space within it. And then that part is then acting in and through me. And then 5 minutes later, it starts shifting away, and I'm like, what the heck just happened? And then the shame comes in, and then I'm defending against the shame inside. And my partner's going to look at me, is like, why did you yell at me? And I'm between apologizing and trying to figure out what happened. What I can practice, and from an IFS lens, it's called speaking, the difference between speaking from a part or speaking for a part. And it's something that I do with my partner a lot, and I call it broadcasting, which is very simply like being able to speak from my internal experience. And it's like if she says something and it's like, ooh, I'm noticing a response and I don't even know what it is yet, but I'm gonna basically, rather than, oh, there's something happening and I let her talk. And then suddenly I'm shifting my attention away from her towards my inner experience, not being here anymore, because I'm like, oh, there's something happening. What should I do with that? I'm not in the conversation anymore. I'm trying to manage something on the inside, and then I might spit it back at her. So my goal is how little time can pass between me noticing something and me expressing it. And that works best with a person that I feel safe with, that I have an agreement with, that I can do that. It could be your therapist, your coach, your mentor. It could be your partner, your best friend. You can do it with yourself, to be honest. And then it's like, ooh, something just happened. And then noticing body, I work very somatically. So people who can feel their bodies, where the body is safe enough to access. Notice what you're feeling and speak for that. There's a contraction in my belly. My shoulders just came forward. My arms just came up. Describing the experience out loud, then noticing the thoughts that come with it, the voices in my head. Oh, there's a voice in my head, there's a part of me saying like, who the fuck do you think you are? You know, a part of me that just didn't like what you just said, a part of me that thinks you're judging us, a part of me that thinks you don't like me. There's a part of me that has strong opinions on the topic and wants to say something. And I'm not gonna speak what those parts want to say, just acknowledge that they're there and that they came up as a response. And I acknowledge them internally first. And often for my partner, all I need then is her general acknowledgement, like, oh, okay, that's happening for you right now. And in that acknowledgement, something shifts. Because because I'm staying in relationship to the experience, I'm capable of speaking for it rather than from it. And that itself gives me space already, because suddenly everything is welcome. It's welcome within me, but then it's also welcome with my partner, because she's like, oh yeah, of course, you're human. Hi to all the parts, because often that they're young. So it's like, hi there to the one that didn't like me to say that, and hi to the one that just wants a hug right now. And even that smile that was just on your face, that happens in the acknowledgement, in the playfulness. And suddenly there's space, and suddenly there's the relationship, and there's a calming and a soothing. And that will help to stay present in the moment with someone when a trigger arises.
Beautiful. Thank you, Martin. I had two parts for my response that come up as you share that. So the first one for me is also someone who's always worked with the body. I just go to the first sign that I am going towards a trigger or an unhelpful response is a sense of contraction. Anywhere within me, there is a sense of contraction. And when I go into contraction, I am closing, I'm blocking. So when I block, I go into defense mode. And that takes me to one of the probably less popular Byron Katie statements, which is that defense is the first act of war. So even my defensiveness is a passive aggressive stance, right? Of I'm not open anymore. I'm not willing to be in this conversation. I'm not willing to form a connection. And so that's what my contraction instantly shows me, is that I have just gone into this. And so for me, I go, oh, I'm contracted. And then I just say, oh, why, where, what just happened? What's going on here? So I'm just very open then to that inquiry for me of what is that's happening. And again, this often, would be in a conversation. So there's that sense of still needing to be present with the other person. Now, I'm not that surrounded by people who know this kind of work. They don't live in that kind of work, right? So for my personal life, it's not somewhere where I'm going to have someone who's going to be co-regulated and understand me say, excuse me, I'm just having a moment where I need to reconcile the parts within myself, right? I have to acknowledge and hold, okay, I'm having a moment here. So in this moment, is it safe for me to reconcile that, whatever that closing off is? And I can tend to it by grounding myself in this body, knowing that this body is safe, this situation is safe, right? If I feel safe in that moment. And if I feel safe, is this something I need to find a way to speak to that's not closed and defensive? Because my closed defensiveness will make this a not very good conversation. And so at that point, if it's not something that I can do openly, then I will have to find a way to get myself some space to defer my response and say, right now, I can't respond safe. Like, I can't respond to that. I don't have an answer until I've gone away and given myself the space and the time to really sit with that as to why I'm closed. And if I do need to, if I don't feel safe, I need to be able to find a way to say, this is not, this is not the time and place. This needs to end, and I walk away. And I am someone who's managed to get myself in enough of those pickles that I know I'm quite good at unsafe situations. And I can say, hand on heart, like I've acted through that. I don't feel safe, and body language, that confidence again of not being actually defensive is really important when not feeling safe. That very clear, just like no, like you said earlier on, and so that comes to me as like my process, especially because I don't have people I can talk to parts with necessarily, but also it comes to me, I like the gun analogy of the little parts of the trigger. And as we get awareness with the triggers, and you also beautifully began with, we have to take responsibility for our own feelings. And so I always say in my groups, instead of doing a confidentiality opening statement, which I know is very common, the lawyer in me found this a weird shift. But actually what I say to people is, in these spaces, you are responsible for what you feel. And if you don't like what someone else says, that's your responsibility. And you don't talk about that person or what happened with anyone else other than the way in which you have to process that as your own responsibility for your own response. So again, always coming back to that, we're responsible for what's happening to us and for taking the appropriate action to resource, I guess, ourselves is really what you're talking about, is that inner resourcing. And so if, we're talking about kind of running concurrent lines, you're in a conversation, but you're recognizing there's these parts and they're all having this thing. And so there's concurrent state going on. How can you be present with all of those emotions and not go mental?
It's so much that you just said. There's so much richness there. I want to jump on the, take responsibility for your feelings. That's a big passion topic of mine. Very controversial as well in many ways. But yes, what you said, like if you're with a person and you're like, let's walk backwards. If the shit hits the fan and I'm getting overwhelmed and I can't go back into a regulated state, anything that would come out of me is just like anger and dismissal, to say like, I'm having a reaction, I need to withdraw, I'll get back to you in 10 minutes, an hour, tomorrow, and just moving on and doing that, and then moving with the feelings in a safe space in whatever way works for people, finding that more regulated state again. That's sort of like plan C or D, basically, if nothing else helps. I want to lean in a little and invite you / challenge you and listeners maybe, and so like try and see what happens when you actually speak for your parts with other people. You'd be surprised how people respond when you lead with vulnerability and humanity. I'm saying like, ooh, can we pause for a moment? I'm just noticing a response to that. You don't have to do anything. I don't need anything from you. Just like, if you can just be here with me for a moment and just hold that space while I'm holding space for myself. Okay. I'm noticing when you use that word, that brought up something for me. Would you be open to, what do you mean by that word, for instance? Truth would be one of those, and doing it live in the moment. And it depends, like, if you're at the checkout at the supermarket, or if you're, arguing with someone. But if you feel safe enough, I highly suggest try and see what happens, because more people than not will be receptive to it. My whole circle around me, the people, most of them speak in parts. Not because I teach them or force them or because I preach. I speak in parts. I speak about my parts. They know I do IFS, and some of them read the books, but it's contagious. If you are being vulnerable and if you're being transparent of your inner state, we're all human. We have feelings. We have 12 feelings at the same time, and they all contradict each other. And yet I have the capacity within me to be with all of that. So just showing, leading by examples, I'm like, whoa, I'm noticing something. Can we pause here for a moment? Pause is one of my favorite words. Just like, can we pause this for a moment? Just nothing happened. You're not responsible for something coming up in me, and I just need to tend to that for a moment. I even do that with clients, where it's like, when something comes up and I'm noticing I can't be present, I have clients that call me out on it. They were like, where did you just go? Like, they're so sensitive. They know if I'm there or not, you know? If you can do that, perfect. If you are worried or concerned or unsure that the person can take that and could be with it without escalating it, do it on the inside. Like just often like withdrawing 50% of my attention from the conversation and just talking to the parts like, I know you want to punch that guy in the face because he just talked shit about something that's really dear to us. I am here with you. You belong to me and I'm here with you. Let me talk to him or her or them. Will you be open to that? Because often parts, they don't know that I'm here. They don't know Big Martin is present. They don't often know that I'm not 12 anymore. Because if I often in my own therapy as a client, I ask a part, how old do you think I am? And the part will look at me and, or like, it's just an intuitive knowing. She says, you're 5 and you're 12. And it's like my job to like, okay, can I tell you a little story? Because time has moved on since I was 12. And like, I'm 44. And they've got like, wow, you're so old. And we're having this whole spiel on the inside of like me introducing myself to a younger version of me. And that is a whole process that ideally you do by yourself in meditation, again, journaling, or even better with a therapist or a coach, someone who's trained, who can hold space like that. But once you start building those relationships on the inside, I can do that in real time. Of like, I'm being with someone and a part comes in and it's like, they just look the way. Do you think that, I don't think they like us very much. I was like, oh, you concerned that they don't like us? I get it. Want to see we find out? Because I'm here. If they like us, great. If they don't like us, I'm fine with that. Not everybody has to like us. What do you think about that? Okay, let's see. Sit on my shoulder, sit in my lap, hide behind me. Cool. And then I'm back in the conversation. And I'm going so far, like I've started doing that out loud with myself even. And there's parts of me that's like, you sound like a complete idiot. Like you're talking to an invisible group of kindergarteners. And the thing is, it does something. It shifts my nervous system. I did that before we went on the call today of like, so like, hello there, imposture. Hello there, not good enough. Hello there, afraid, speaking too much, too loud, not too loud, mumbling too much, or whatever. And something shifts by simply acknowledging and validating it. And there's a magic in that. Once I acknowledge something, it feels seen. And once I validate the experience, it can relax. And something shifts, and suddenly I'm back in the conversation 100%.
Beautiful. Thank you, Martin. Yeah. And I think I first, just to kind of provide some alternates as to where people might be coming from and listening to this conversation. For me, one of the first places in just being able to stop and hold space for my feelings without it even necessarily being about a part, but just to be present with an emotion and acknowledge that I was having an emotion, was a past partner of mine. We had a fairly volatile relationship. And there was more arguing than I've ever had in my life. And I found that some of the nonviolent communication pieces were really helpful, just in that simplicity of me being able to also show up and say, you know, in the middle of a row, to stop and just pause, not even ask for a pause. So I don't ask for a pause, by the way. I'm someone who just goes quiet. And I'm just like, done. Like, while I need my quiet, and to do that, I'm just quiet, which is rare, right? That I would be quiet. So it makes enough of an impact, that the fact that I'm quiet. And then once I've got that, I can say, I'm feeling this because I have interpreted the following, that you have, this saying, this thing that you've just done, that this is my interpretation. And if I can, and I know it comes from such and such a thing, like that is why I relate that. So that is a way, I think, if you're not connected to a part, but you're just even learning to tune into emotions and being more present with the emotions and what's happening. If you're not sure what the part is or any of that conversation, just to even be able to stop and say, I'm taking responsibility. Again, I'm back to responsibility. I'm taking responsibility for what I think is my truth. My truth right now is that I've made this interpretation, and I can see that my interpretation comes from the following experiences, and they have laid a perception of reality that I can see right now might not be serving me and might not be serving our conversation, and could be making this a really challenging conversation for us to have right now. And therefore, my stepping into that ownership is a vulnerability, right? Because I'm being vulnerable about how I feel. I'm being vulnerable about my perception that I'm wrong, that I could be seeing something differently. And therefore, there's that humility also that you mentioned earlier on. So we have that openness, and therefore it creates an invitation for the other person to drop gear and shift conversation. And so that for me was definitely a huge turning point, was even being able to stop and give myself that space to acknowledge that much in a conversation. And that I felt definitely opened up over time a deeper relationship with where do those emotions come from and what are the beliefs beneath that are constructing those emotions as to why that belief is inconsistent. Why do I have contradictory feelings at the same time? Because I have conflicting beliefs around different yes-no experiences as a child, right? That I have created this very paradoxical environment within me that sometimes feels like the circus that got out and has no one who's the master anymore.
You are a big Nid. It's the circus director.
And so thank you for and I love the playfulness though that you bring through by the parts work, because I think it's through playfulness that opens up our curiosity. And a lot of that is what makes the shift in the nervous system, that it can relax when we can be playful, we can be a bit more light. That really helps that nervous system shift. And so that brings us back to the trauma part. Mm-hmm. Again, that you mentioned earlier on, whatever that level of small, big T it may be in your life, how we can find the parts can help us be more playful in shifting what might be our truth.
In that, yeah. I love that you brought in nonviolent communication. Like Rosenberg, I'm a big fan of his. Like, had a big influence on how I see things, and not just communication wise, but in many other ways. And I want to add to what you said, like if people rub against the idea of parts, speak of aspects, speak of something is there, just acknowledging like there's a feeling inside me, there's a something is here right now. I am with concurrent work streams, I am with many feelings at the same time. It doesn't matter that the words don't really matter, it's the relationship to it and the sense that I can welcome it. And if I feel like I can't welcome it, then that's another part of me. Because I believe with all my everything, at our core, we all hold a deep capacity to be with all the feelings and all the experiences, all the pain, all the grief, all the goodness, the joy, the abundance, without the need to run away or change anything. Mm-hmm. Once that acceptance comes from our innermost core, then I can act. Then I can, tell somebody to fuck off because I don't like the way they behave in front of me. But I'm doing that from a very conscious or present state rather than reactive. And the reactivity is what usually gives a hint of that might have to do with an unintegrated trauma response or unintegrated trauma creating a response. And for me, it always feels like familiar. Like many years ago arguing with my girlfriend at the time, and it literally felt like I'm talking to my very first girlfriend. I was 17, and then the next thing she looked like my mom, and I feel like I'm having an argument with my mom actually. And it was so strong on the inside that while I was like very intensely talking to her, I paused and I was like, it feels like I'm talking to my mom. And she said, like, yeah, because this doesn't feel like you're talking to me, like, And when situations resemble painful situations from the past, that unintegrated response will show up again, asking us to be seen. And what usually happens is it's not seen because we're in argument, or we're telling it to go away again. I don't want you here. And then it's sent back to wherever it came from. And I look at it as different, like, screenshots, snapshots of ourselves spread out through time and space. And there's a beautiful show on Apple called The Crowded Room. And there's a psychologist in the show that says at some point in the series, trauma is the closest thing we have to time travel. And that element of like, oh, how does this feel like? Am I respond? It's normal to have feelings. It's normal to have emotions. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I might get angry. And then that anger can pass through, and that's perfect. If that anger turns to rage immediately because this is the most outrageous thing ever, chances are there's some piled up anger from the past that I have not yet have had a chance or have felt safe enough to feel and be with and integrate. Grief is a similar one. Like, a lot of people never give themselves chance to grieve. So whenever something happens, they see somebody cry on TV or die on TV, or somebody actually dies, and then they grieve disproportionately. And grief is, it can be a big one. I'm not saying you're grieving too much. It's not like that, but it's being able to discern what is a live reaction or live response in this moment, today, here and now, and how much of it is coming in from 1994. And often it's like it's 10% from now and 90% from the 90s, the 80s, or the 2000s, or whenever that happened, basically. Therapy is where we learn to take care of integrating that. So whenever the feelings show up, it's eventually 50-50. In the ideal case scenario is it's 100% in the moment, or 99% in the moment, and 1% reminder, oh yeah, that time. But there's no charge coming at me from the past. If there's charge coming at me from the past, that's my job to be, again, doing that integrative work, therapy, breath work, coaching, whatever works for the people, somatic, anything that helps me integrate. And then learning how to be with actually in the moment feelings. That's again relational, of like, oh, allowing myself. There's the idea like socially prescribed feelings, like women are allowed to get sad, but you don't want to see an angry woman because that's not sexy. Man, we're allowed to be angry and loud, but boys don't cry. Like, we're not gonna be sad because then you're weak. And often you can see that guys like expressing their anger, very, gender normative expression of like, man, get angry, but what's underneath is sadness. And for women could be the same thing, like, that their sadness is just a skewed expression of unexpressed anger. And allowing ourselves to look at the whole rainbow of feelings. And I don't believe in good or bad feelings. It's just like, it's different colors of the rainbow, because which one is the positive side, the purple or the red one? Anger is just as useful and helpful and beautiful as is grief, as is love, as is gratitude. We're just being conditioned into, don't feel it, don't be too loud, don't express that, don't make a fuss, stiff upper lip. You're from the UK, so like the British mannerisms, of course, like, we're all very, we don't feel. So practicing the echoes with the echoes, integrating them, and practicing being okay with our humanity of like, oh yeah, I have feelings, I'm human. I believe that's what we're here for, to feel things and to relate to them, not to be overwhelmed by them, but again, tapping into our deep capacity to hold presence with how life unfolds in any given moment.
I love the rainbow of emotions, which is definitely how I love to see it as well. I think it's too easy to place some kind of negative connotation over an emotion, and therefore it creates that desire to push it away and to reject. And that's going to be a rejection of a part of ourselves. And it's how can we embrace that feeling? And there two things come up that you shared for me personally, kind of actually three probably. One was that after my brain injury, when I was doing yoga nidras, we do opposite emotions and opposite feelings. And that was the first time that I really got to know my emotions and how they physically felt in my body. Was giving myself that time to imagine an emotion and see what it felt like. And it didn't always feel like what they said in books. It didn't always feel like it was the body part that they say that's where you would feel anger. I'd be like, no, that's not how it feels. And it's interesting because it's an opposites practice. You're swinging, like consciously swinging between what is a perceived opposite, right? And so some feelings or emotions,
give me an example.
Love and hate. So I have a yoga nidra that has love and hate. Not everyone does well with that practice, obviously, because it's quite a strong extreme and it's quite hard. People find it really hard to shift from hate, oddly enough, into love. And so it's one of the more advanced practices. And that is the intention of this practice, right? So that not only do we feel these extreme opposites, but we also learn to be able to realize that it's within our control, it's within our capacity to choose. Also, not to bypass, obviously, you could use this as a bypassing tool, but it's also to help you navigate holding space for both emotions. And what we do in that practice is we speed up your ability to transition faster and faster and faster until you're holding the both simultaneously. And that, for me, I remember the first time I started realizing I could flip, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then the other thing was the first time I actually simultaneously held opposing emotions. The paradox created a blissful place, because when we hold it all, and this is something I was shown later on, is that when we can hold all of the complexity, all of the extreme, it is compassion. Compassion holds all of the range of emotions as one whole experience. And in compassion, we really have true bliss, because there is no discrimination against any of these emotions. They're all just that rainbow. And it's like tasting the rainbow, if you go back to the Skittles adverts in England. So it's that tasting the rainbow, that blissful delight of sweetness, and the magic of all of these emotions. And so for me, that rainbow that you said, and that's the joy of being human, is to really dive in, be in these feelings and allow them to move through us. Because as Jill Bolte Taylor says, 90 seconds to allow neurologically an emotion moves through our body. So it's not long. The second thing that you said about how much is influenced by the past. And I feel like this is a really one I just wanted to repeat for everyone listening. My most shameful behavior in my life was just before my brain injury, obviously, just as my marriage was falling apart, where my sister stopped speaking to me for years. I rejected my dad walking into my house. I broke up with my ex-husband. My mother and I had a massive financial falling out. It was just everything was going very wrong. And the one thing that I remember my ex-husband said to me at this point was, we had moved into my childhood home. And he said to me that it was like living with someone filled with ghosts, because it re-triggered constantly all of those memories of my childhood. And I could not help but be reacting as an adult now with the independence, right, of I'm in control of this house, but terribly, right? And I was speaking my truth, right? And I was asserting my boundaries, and I was putting up some no's. I was doing all of those wonderful things that we talk about. That's the purpose of this podcast, of this episode in particular, is I was really speaking my truth. My truth was definitely a traumatized 6-year-old. And she was on the rampage to make sure that everyone in my life paid for the things that they had done to her as a 6-year-old, and whatever the other years were that I was there. And she really was a rage bomb, right? But I was doing that at the age of 30. And it damaged so much within my family. And in all honesty, it took my brain injury for my sister and I to speak again. It took that degree of shift in my life for me to stop and really own that truth at that time was really not for anyone's benefit. My standing up and speaking those boundaries was not honoring myself, was not honoring relationships, was not honoring the goodwill that people had towards me. And we can get ourselves into this mess of thinking that we're doing the boundary work, thinking that we're speaking our truth. I'm standing up, I'm not suppressing my voice anymore. And it's so damaging. And I'm very grateful to my family for the forgiveness that they have extended to me. And with that, the amount of forgiveness I had to extend myself for what I've done and for the way in which I behaved. And so I wanted to come to this because it was a key part, obviously, of our conversation also originally is when is it, can we stop and really be honest about that, identifying when it's not of benefit to speak that truth, like really honoring that what you want to say, no matter how much it feels the most righteous thing to do. And generally it's a righteous feeling, I would say, that kind of comes with that. It's my time. They got to hear this word. It's got to be said. What would be your guidance to someone with that amount of kind of energy drawing forward their speaking their truth?
My first piece of unsolicited advice to everyone would be, don't move into your childhood home.
The winner.
I'm smiling at the timing because it sounds like you moved in around your Saturn return. Like, what could possibly go wrong? I want to see that as a what do they call, like the reality TV situation.
It was priceless, I have to say, the amount of things. Anyway, there's so many stories in it, it's rich.
I can only imagine. I think you spoke beautifully about, because what I'm hearing you say, or the way I'm interpreting it, is like, it wasn't Big Nid who spoke her truth. It was a 6-year-old who spoke her truth. But at the time, you weren't in relationship with the 6-year-old. You were the 6-year-old again. And again, it goes back to what I said before, like the first step is to be able to relate to my internal experience. I am big on consent and boundaries, and not just in the sexual context, in all walks of life. And I think it's okay to speak the truth of my 6-year-old to someone if they consent to it. And there are spaces where it can be healthy to some degree. It's always the question, am I re-traumatizing myself? Am I just re-expressing and reliving something? Because there's no healing in that. Healing happens when we're being in connection with someone. IFS has this beautiful word that it's got borrowed from somewhere else. I don't know the origins, but it's called witnessing. Often in the spiritual realms, the witness is the observer removed and just watching. A witness is here with me. And trauma gets integrated in the moment when somebody's there with me and co-regulates with me and acknowledges, like, oh, you just fell down, you're hurting, and now you're angry because you feel embarrassed. It's okay to express that. And then we can set boundaries. Siblings are not for hitting, a pillow is. Walls are not for writing, paper is. And I don't even have to say, like, you're a bad boy, you're a bad girl, you're a bad child because you're doing that. It's like, this is not for that. This is meant for something else. And if you want to express it, there are safe ways of doing so. So doing that as a grown-up and going into, I don't know, rage room or the Jungian shadow work process, not everybody referring to shadow work. There's an actually Jungian process of what shadow work is. And a lot of that is oscillating between, or my understanding of it, is oscillating between Big Martin allowing to go into like 12-year-old Martin. Big Martin, 12-year-old. And I'm inviting my 12-year-old to give his experience to me. And we're staying in relationship the whole time. I'm never taken over completely because that part of me trusts me. But then I can go out, I can smash things, I can break things, I can yell, I can express whatever hate or criticism I had towards my parents or school or society. And I can do that in a way that feels safe and that feels safe to other people around. If somebody agrees, I've worked with people and they're like, show me your anger. Show me your anger. Like, show me how you yell. Show me how you punch. With my partner would even go, just punch me in the shoulder. Show me your anger. How badly do you want to hit me right now? And again, bringing that edge of playfulness into it. Because playfulness on the nervous system side is when we are still anchored in the ventral vagal side, where we've got social connection and social capacity, but we're leaning into a hybrid state where we're touching into the sympathetic fight flight energy. So I can be anchored in safety of connection, but then I can be edgy and I can be playful because I'm still accessing. That's where we play, that's where animals play, that's where good sex happens, because we still have that fire while we have the safety of our nervous system's connection. So if you need to express it to someone, talk to that part first. Have it expressed to you. Express it to your therapist. Express it to a friend. Write it down. There's so much power. I keep saying that. Journaling. Write down that hate speech. Read it out loud. Record yourself. Listen to it. Be with it. But that's the whole thing, being with it. You mentioned compassion before, and I differentiate, like inspired by a lot of academic work, actually. Tanya Singer writes about that, the difference between compassion and empathy.
Mm.
Because empathy can be empathic distress. I feel how you feel, and I can get just as dysregulated and overwhelmed as you are. Compassion is the difference between empathy and compassion, in simple terms, is empathy is I'm here for you. Compassion is I'm here with you. Empathy often assumes that you need help, that you are not capable of doing things. Compassion assumes that you've got everything that you need. And I'm here as a witness. I'm here to help you if you want that, but there's nothing wrong with you. And so self-compassion is turning that towards myself, like saying there's nothing wrong with me. It's okay to hold that anger. It's okay to wanting to express it. If I'm angry at my parents and they are aware enough that I said, Mom, Dad, I've been holding some anger for years about what happened in 1998. Are you willing to listen to my anger? And all I need you to do is stand there and listen to me. That's all. And if the person goes, yeah, I can do that. And then you can go and actually yell at your father. Fucking fantastic. Family constellation would be another version. I had sessions with my therapist doing IFS where I was sitting with a toddler inside me, like a 3-year-old, and which was interesting because at the time, like he asked, "Where's mommy?" And I looked at my therapist and like, my little one was asking where mom is, which is confusing because at the time when I was 3 or at his age, mommy was still around, but now mommy isn't around anymore. And so he took care of that. And what he said was, um, time has moved on since, and mommy's not around anymore. Mommy has moved on. And sitting with that grief, sitting with those tears of the 3-year-old inside me that had lost his mother, that wasn't even aware of it at the time. There's parts of me like, does it even make sense? You should have seen the feelings that came with that.
Mm.
And there's the idea that from my big self, from my deep capacity, I can relate to everything in me. And I believe that is true from my experience and what I've seen with my clients. I also have parts in me that still miss their mother or still miss a mother. And no matter how much compassion or presence or playfulness I'm sharing with them, completely giving them agency, letting them take the lead, letting them come to me when they're ready, letting them tell me what they need, making offers, being okay if they don't want it. And knowing that I'm never going to be enough, my presence is never going to be enough for them. it's gonna be good. They like me, but there's always something missing. There's always that wound in there of the grief of like, I didn't have that warm, caring presence that I would have needed growing up. I didn't have the father around that I would have needed. So there's pain there, there's grief there. And my current working theory is like, okay, what if that never shifts? What if that is the end of the line and it's never going to be integrated fully?
Mm.
I've just all I can do is being okay with that.
Mm. It really it sits with acceptance of where is the feeling in the present moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not trying to change it and not trying to fix it. And with that, sitting with that, accepting that there's a part that can't release that grief, and or the
I wouldn't
missing,
call
or
it
the
can't
missing
release.
love, like the
The
missing
missing is
love.
never be full. It's never gonna be.
It's
Mhm.
but without, but with sitting with that and just with sitting with the acceptance of it, that is the compassion piece. That
Mhm.
is the sitting with what it
That is
feels like to
that
sit
is
in
the
the
truth.
discomfort.
That is
Because
my
it's,
truth in the moment. That's my part's truth.
yeah, and just to have compassion for that. And that's, that's the greatest gift
Yeah.
to keep giving yourself. And it repeats again
Mhm.
and again. And it keeps repeating because it's necessary for that ability to go deeper into your own heart and deeper into what love there is for you to discover.
Mhm.
And I see those wounds as just being that constant nonstop spiral inwards of more and more love of like, how can I love myself more? Well, it's not in a being best, being fixed, being whole. It's just in every moment there's like, how can I wrap that compassion and just let that be what it is, and that's okay.
Mhm. It's as I was listening to you, what came up for me is that like being, and part of me doesn't want me to say that, but there's me missing the mother figure as well. And so we can kind of, I can miss it together with my little 3-year-old and with my 8-year-old, and it's different. I don't believe in the inner child. I've got like a whole kindergarten group, as I mentioned before. But there's something about we can miss together and
Mm,
be with that and allowing it to be okay, ultimately. And like you said, nothing needs to be fixed or changed. It's just that, okay. And with that okayness, also what shifts is I'm not looking for my mom anymore in my partners, in other women, because there has been an integration. There's been I still like to be cuddled and like still have human needs of closeness and warmth and connections and sex and whatnot. But it's not that compensatory drive that is behind it all. And that's what integration, the power of integration, of like suddenly I can do all the things that my needs are and I meet those needs, minus that baggage that came with from the past that made it all feel so heavy and so important and so life-threatening, and suddenly it
mm.
can turn into a little lighter kind of like approach, a little bit more playfulness, a little bit more, okay.
Yeah. It reminds me of like, I can see like your 3-year-old being like, oh, okay, cool. Can we go and play now? It's got that kind of, like that 3-year-old energy, right? It's sort of like once
Yeah,
everything, once you tell the 3-year-old,
yeah,
it's okay,
yeah.
right? They go, okay, let's move on,
And
and
he can play and still miss his mom. So like it's
yeah,
not like he's sitting in the corner crying all day. He can still do things. And what you just said, like that is how I see like how the blueprint for our emotions. If you ever see a toddler, they fall down. Ideally, somebody comes and co-regulates, holds them. We need another person to learn how to co-regulate first. Um, to self-regulation to me is internalized co-regulation. I speak to myself in the way that my caregiver spoke to me or how I'm learning it if they didn't. But that idea of like a toddler falling down, crying, fully committed to the experience. And it's almost like becoming that 90-second experience, a little longer sometimes, of an emotion passing through, like I become a conduit to it.
Mm.
And suddenly they're like, can I go play now? And that's how we're supposed to feel our feelings as grown-ups as well. And then what gets in the way is the social conditionings or cultural conditionings of we don't cry in public, we can't do this. And rather than, how cool would it be if people just walk around and like, I'm sad right now, give me a moment, like, "Rah!" Okay, I'm okay now. Can we go back to work? Let's trade on Wall Street. Like, let's see patients. Let's go to court. Your Honor, I need a moment. "Rah!" I'm back. But that's, I imagine I would want to see a Netflix series like that. It would be a kind of like utopia where feelings are being felt in real time, everything is expressed in real time, and then it's really the like the Eckhart Tolle kind of power
Mm.
of the present moment, the power of now. And yeah, I think that's what it comes down to, feeling everything as close to real time as possible.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I love watching toddlers. They're actually one of my favorite, it
Yours?
brings, I get probably one of the most weird fulfilled joys in my life is actually from just going and watching toddlers, because I just love the raw truth of what they
Yes.
do.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it lets my heart sing. I'm like, God, yes, exactly what you said. Like, why can't we all just walk around and like really like allow it without going, oh, it's personal. What you just did, like that was an attack and affront on me. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's just like expression and we're done.
Yeah.
And I love it. And it does remind me a little bit of the movie Inside Out, which have you ever
Yes.
seen? Yeah, a little
Yeah, yeah.
bit of that. Like that's the closest where I think we've got to a movie that
Talking
does
about
it.
parts, that's very much it's very highly loved in the parts work community. I saw a post Instagram somewhere where somebody said like that they, I think it's that little kid, that toddler basically, that they just learning to talk and they're walking around and whenever they like something, they just scream, happy! And I've started doing that just like with friends sitting somewhere, food gets ordered, we're all sitting there just like happy. And what if it wasn't just the happy one, but like also the angry or like sad, if you could express it in the moment. And again, I would invite everyone watching this, create those spaces for yourself, like have it with your partner, your family, have it with yourself, where you express your feelings like that playfully. Just see what happens. It does something. It is so deeply profound, the shift that happens if I can express my truth in any given moment in a safe way, respecting myself and others. I think that's the key there, consent and respect in all directions. And then suddenly that burden doesn't get as heavy because I'm not putting things into the bag again. I'm
Yeah.
actually taking things out, and life becomes a little lighter as I go along, as I dance through it, and as I have fun with it playfully.
And it is wonderful, if you can demonstrate that. You just reminded me, I had a technical issue booking a flight, and I had to then submit a complaint to the airline in order to get my flight sorted. And they were rude to me on the phone. And it was one of those, like, every step was more and more frustrating.
Mm.
And I was feeling that frustration. And there was two other people watching me go through this process. And I was there with the cushion. And I was going at this cushion. And then back on the phone, very calm. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. In between. And it, and as I said, I'm not surrounded by people who do parts work, but they are people who will give you permission to
Yes.
express your emotion, to own your emotion, to say, right now I feel like this. I just need a bit of space for this. And I think that is what I would say. I'm surrounded by people who are just very open and accepting of, you feel that and you have your time in your space, and if you need me, I'm here to hold your hand. And yep, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it, whatever it is. If you just need to go box, that's fine. We can do boxing together. That's a great fun way that we like to do it together. So we have those ways. And even something as tiny, right, as technology driving you mad, right? Like expressing that frustration makes so much difference to the amount of stress that we're carrying and how easy it is to then get triggered by something, you know, that is more substantive in your life.
Absolutely. So. The two thoughts that come up in that way, like one quick one is a friend of mine, a single mom, when her toddler, when she was little, her daughter was little, whenever she had feelings like this, she would like go to her daughter like, mommy has feelings, got nothing to do with you, they're my feelings, I'll be back. And she would turn around, like, you know, grab the pillow, go like, ah, like, mommy is back. But A, taking care of her own feeling, but also modeling, like, you know, the feelings want to be expressed and there are safe ways to do so. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that a lot in the spiritual circles and so the law of attraction kind of crowd has that idea often of like the hierarchical idea of like high vibe, like gratitude, compassion, high vibe, and shame and guilt being like low vibe. And what a burden. What a burden if I'm in the belief that if I have certain feelings, I'm gonna get punished by the universe. And that idea of like just expressing everything again, because I can welcome it rather than seeing shame as being something that the universe is going to punish me for because now I'm in a low vibration and now I'm not going to get my diamonds and my Ferrari basically because I fucked up. No, welcoming everything. And again, how long does it take to actually let that feeling pass through? And even being playful about it. Hi, anger. How are you doing today? Like, oh, you look fiery red. Come on, show me how fiery you are. And in that way, like taking the seriousness out of it without playing it away, I can be playful and angry at the same time. Something can be serious and still have a comedic edge. Like, and I'm very much a Monty Python believer in that way of like everything nonsense and somewhere there's sense making happening in between.
I love that. That is such a good description of the magic of healing, is that it's all nonsense, but somewhere in there's some sense.
It doesn't matter at all. The most important thing at the same time, like the Buddhist approach, I think, to some things, like in holding that polarity of like nothing fucking matters and this is the most important thing ever. And being playing with that, and as you said, holding the contradictions and being okay with it. Learning, continuously learning to be okay with it.
Yeah. And it is a continuous learning because there's always the next layer of feelings that I feel you can be challenged by. That's part of our growth, that's part of our expansion, is to keep feeling and is to keep acknowledging and being with those feelings. And so, and it's funny you mentioned law of attraction, because when I was training as a law of attraction practitioner, which is one of the things, many weird things that I've done in my life, it was actually acknowledging and doing the shadow work that was the most highlighted part of our training. That is what is bypassed because it's not popular online. It's not popular on YouTube videos, right? Is that if you don't do that work, right, then you're not fully integrating. You're not fully acknowledging, and that's why things don't, work out. That's why things manifest strangely, right? Because there's this undercurrent of the denial, of the hiding of these feelings. And actually, we need to work with that and integrate it for it to be a part of our nervous system, adjusting to the expansion that you seek when you're changing your vibration. So we look at it from just that yin yang energetic perspective, which is for me, what I always come back to is the energy of something. As something expands, it's going to expand what is crappy underneath. And so if I don't tend to what is crap, I'm going to have a lot of shit that's going to manifest in my life. I'm going to be like, yay, shiny thing with a big pile of pants. And I don't want that. And so that's actually the core of the teaching of law of attraction. We don't want to do it that way. We want to take and integrate and deal with all of that stuff so that it doesn't magnify that at the same time. And so, it's funny the way in which obviously teachings always get marketed and overly simplified for the messaging, and I think underneath, obviously, the core of many teachings really, when it always comes back to it, is that full acceptance of those parts of that shadow. And in full acceptance, to me, that speaking the truth is always internally acknowledging and honoring that inner dialogue, that inner conversation, and really having integrity about, is it necessary? Is it of benefit that I actually share what is coming through, and how and when is that of benefit? And that, to me, is kind of more of the Buddhist values to question before coming into whatever that speaking that truth is. But the open forum of whatever is true is definitely that internal piece. And I would like to give you an opportunity just to share anything that you'd like to with everyone about yourself, your work, where people can get in touch with you. Is there something, anything extra you'd like to share before we close today?
I'm building with my partner, we're building a platform called deepcapacity.com. And probably by the time this goes live, there's going to be a landing page and you can pop in your email if you like. This is going to be a platform all around like tapping into your deep capacity that I described, the big Martin, the big you, and learning to heal and integrate from there, taking it into relationships, like your deep capacity for relationship, your deep capacity for love, your deep capacity for leadership and business. So we're taking that compassionate, powerfully compassionate approach into different aspects. I have no idea where we're going to start, but please pop by. There might be a book happening at some point under the same name. And yeah, a lot happening here right now. But I'll put an email there as well if anybody has any questions or needs clarification of things that I said. I have resources, I have journal prompts, I have an Instagram where I talk about things infrequently. So please stop by. Love to see some of you. And I hope this has been helpful and useful and a little bit entertaining, maybe even.
Thank you so much, Martin. And I would just like to also confirm that Martin's partner for that future website, which will probably be live by the time this comes out, it's true, is amazing as well. She is awesome. And so the power of these two as a combination is something you'll want to check out and drop into. I know it will be a profoundly deep container. And so please do make sure you go and check them out. And otherwise, thank you so much, Martin. It's been a personal real joy for me to spend so much time with you. I'm really, really grateful for you showing up to share and speak your truth in this present moment with everyone on the podcast and on YouTube. And we really would just love to say best of luck. I know you're already busy, but best of luck with the future projects that you guys are working on, and looking forward to seeing more of you sharing and being a part of this global container of love.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. This has been a delight. We should do this again sometime.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
After such a wonderful interview, and really starting to drop into those layers at which we can be moving through our authentic and truthful communication, we're going to take a mantra meditation in our next episode. So make sure you subscribe and watch the next video in this series to learn this wonderful mantra. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful day.